What's going on? So today's going to be a little bit more of a raw, uncut, slightly longer video, I hope. I saw this idea and I thought it looked like a fun piece of content to do. This is the S-tier diet hack. So, if you don't find this fun, my main hobby is golf, so literally anything is more fun than that. But basically what I'm going to do, I've picked 11 diets. I could have gone more, could have gone less, but I've tried to give some broad variety here. There's some common diets here. These are the most common that I found on the internet, and there's some I could have put in, but mostly I wanted to get to the ones that you probably have tried before yourself and just kind of rank them at where I see them as best or most efficient for you in terms of a weight loss plan. There's no sort of specific metrics or numbers behind this. This is just my experience from almost a decade of coaching people to be their last ever weight loss coach. And by that, I mean when people work with me, they never need to worry about dieting or hiring another nutritionist again. So I think that's a pretty good place to start from. Anyway, I'm going to keep this raw and a little bit more lighthearted, but let's dive in, and I'm just going to use my instinct here to go with this. So if we're starting off, first on the list, one that you guys have probably heard before is keto dieting. Now, if you don't know what this is essentially only eating fats and proteins. So you are literally zero carb. You are in a state of ketosis, which you can measure. It essentially is that your body is producing ketones for fuel rather than ingesting carbohydrates, turning them into glycogen, and using that as your fuel source. Now, where am I putting keto? This is a tough one. I'm verging on A or B. I think for the right person, this can be an efficient diet. And it's the second one on the list is intermittent fasting, which we'll get into in a second. Both of these are very, very similar. Let's just ask the first question. Are they effective? Yes. For some people, keto is an extremely effective diet. Most people get it kind of confused as to why the diet is effective. They think because they are not inducing carbohydrates, not ingesting carbohydrates, their body is using fats as a fuel source, which is true to an extent. But they then believe that their body is burning fat as a result of using fat as a fuel source. And this is actually what I did my thesis on at the end of my university degree, is metabolic flexibility. That's the ability for your body to switch between utilizing carbohydrates for high intensity exercise and then also simultaneously utilize fats as a fuel source for cognitive function, to keep your immune system active, all these other things that we need. Using fats whilst you're doing very light aerobic exercise or just whilst you're resting, that is metabolic flexibility. And you want the ability to digest both of those and use them both as fuel sources, because as you'll find out further down the line in this video, they both serve a purpose. So most people get it wrong that keto is some kind of magic fat burning component or diet that really just works because it burns extra fat. And it's not always the case. In fact, it works the same way that any other diet does, by inducing a calorie deficit. If you only have 3 types of nutrients that you can ingest every day, protein, carbohydrates, and fats, and I take away carbohydrates, i.e. the one that's most palatable and easiest to digest and actually isn't really that filling compared to the other two, then of course you're going to be consuming less calories. The benefit of a keto diet is that it's extremely filling, and actually a lot of the foods that you leave on the table for most people are quite fun. Imagine a diet where you're allowed to eat bacon, eggs, burgers, steak, cheese, avocados, anything like that. Anything that is protein and fats is in the diet. Anything that's carbohydrates is out. And when I say out, I mean out. So this brings us to the second question I have, which is how convenient or sustainable is it? Most diets are great in the effective state, like they can work. They work for a certain percentage of the population really, really well. But for other people, they'll try it and go, nah, that didn't work as well for me, and I don't know why. Keto is effective because it's so easy to stick to. You feel fuller all the time. People report having better energy, but again, that's contentious. Is it just because we're cutting out carbohydrates and your body's like, you're in ketosis, you're starving, get me food immediately, I'm alert, I'm awake, I'm ready to go hunt an animal? I don't know. That's up for debate. But the one thing for certain is people find this one easy to stick to. So I'm verging on putting this in the A bracket as an effective diet tool. The reason I don't use keto is I like carbohydrates. I like to eat out. I like to enjoy pastries and chocolate, even a glass of wine occasionally. Those things enhance the quality of my life. They make me happier, and if I'm happier and I'm enjoying a diet, I'm going to stick to it longer. And that's the case for anyone. So for me personally, keto has a little bit of a drawback that I can't go out for pizza. I can't eat a donut because the reported crash from ingesting carbohydrates when you're not used to doing that is phenomenal. Your blood sugar is going to spike immediately and crash immediately, and you're going to feel lethargic, tired, and crap. And that's not really what you want from a diet long term. It doesn't allow you flexible lifestyle choices. It doesn't allow you to eat out or eat whilst you're traveling. It's incredibly difficult to do. So I almost talked myself into it, but I'm going to put keto in A category. I'm sorry about that for all you guys who are against keto, but there's a lot of shit diets coming down the line, so I'm sorry, I'm going to put that one in there. Okay, keto's in there. Intermittent fasting is next, and if you've not tried intermittent fasting, it's essentially that you have a window of time in the day that you're allowed to eat food. Again, allow is a really strong word. I don't know if that's appropriate for the diet culture anymore, but if you can only eat between 12 and 6, you're missing a meal. And yeah, if each meal in your day is 500 calories and you take one out, then you're going to be down to 1,000 calories. And again, this works for the same practice and principles. Is that number one, you're just removing a certain food or meal from your diet. I don't know if I always agree with that. Number two, you're reducing the time window that you can eat in. So if you're having lunch at 12 and dinner at 6, you've kind of got a small gap in the day where you don't really need to eat that much more. Like if you can just make it to 12, have a really decent, wholesome, fulfilling lunch, and then you only have to wait until 6 o'clock or even 5 o'clock for dinner, there's not a huge gap there. You're not going to squeeze in an extra meal, and you're actually very unlikely to snack in between those 2 meal times as well. That's part of keto's benefits as well, is that there's very few snacks in the world that are all protein and fats. A lot of them contain sugar or carbs in some format, so there's less snacking, and that's a huge proxy for people who are successful with their diets. Because we don't always track snacking, sometimes it shows up as like a little discretionary thing on MyFitnessPal, or we underestimate the amount of calories that are in our snacks. So intermittent fasting works pretty well in that sense. The drawback with intermittent fasting, you don't get breakfast. Okay, not a big deal for most people. We live busy lives. We're out the door first thing in the morning. There's a reported alertness and stuff that comes with intermittent fasting just from not having that spike of insulin in the morning and a drop straight after your breakfast. So people feel like their energy is much more steady until 12 o'clock. But again, it doesn't allow for a huge amount of flexibility, and it works the same way that everything else does. People just assume because these things are really effective that somehow it has some magical fat-burning properties, when it's just removing a certain meal from your day. It's a calorie deficit, the same way that every other diet works like that. Are there drawbacks to intermittent fasting? I've personally found through using this myself and with clients that after a period of time, say you work out first thing in the morning, you kind of want to have your fueling right if performance and energy in the gym is something that's important to you. So not going into the gym or going into the gym under-fueled and not having anything either side of that, it can wear away at muscle mass. And especially if you are, I don't want to say elderly, but if you are a woman who's reaching a certain age, you need to be having protein and carbs either side of your workout to protect muscle mass on your body, because we all know that the lower amount of muscle mass you have on your body, the slower your digestion and your metabolism is going to be. So the best diets in the world give you protein and carbs in adequate amounts. They allow you to be flexible. They give you good energy throughout the day, and they don't reduce the amount of muscle mass that's on your body constantly. Okay, so maybe I'm changing my mind on this a little bit, but I'm going to put intermittent fasting into the A column. I think it's pretty good. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to move keto to the B column. So that's through our first two. Third is Slimming World. Now, if you don't know what Slimming World is, I believe this is the same as Weight Watchers. I've not got experience of this diet personally using it myself, but from what people have told me, I see two sides of this. A lot of people will go to Slimming World or Weight Watchers and they are given a prescription of foods that they're allowed to eat. Again, anytime you hear the word allowed, or anytime you find a diet that it forces you to remove a certain food, I consider that to not be particularly sustainable or flexible in any way. It's not efficient. There's some diets that work really effectively, and there's some diets that are just more convenient. The more convenient they are, the more likely you're to do them more often. If you think about the way that you eat right now, it's probably quite convenient. But Slimming World is essentially setting you up with a calorie target that I believe is super low and super generic, and some food choices that essentially say these foods are off the table, these foods you can eat as much as possible. Now, one side of the coin is essentially telling you that you cannot eat these foods, you can eat as much of these as possible. Well, in theory, correct, yes. Like if you only ate fish, protein, vegetables, and you didn't eat any junk foods or snacks or high calorie foods like that, yes, you'd probably find that you're fuller all the time and you're losing weight pretty consistently. But unfortunately, it's not as black and white as that. You could still eat 3,000 calories of chicken breast every day and be gaining weight, but you feel like you're doing the right thing in terms of sticking with your diet. The other thing that is not effective is demonizing foods. I know that Weight Watchers calls certain foods sins, as in these are bad things. You're not allowed to do them. And I think that demonizes foods and it builds an unhealthy relationship with foods. In fact, a lot of people who come to me after working with Slimming World and Weight Watchers, they find that their diet relationship is completely warped. They look at certain foods as guilty or shameful and they're not allowed to do it. And guess what happens if you find a food guilty or shameful? You actually want to explore it a little bit more. It's more tempting, and I don't think that's a healthy way to live, looking at donuts like they're the end of my diet, because we all know that you can fit a donut into your diet and still be under your calorie deficit for the day. It's tough, but it's doable. In fact, people in our program regularly have pizza and wine nights like once a week, and they still lose weight week on week. So that's one part of it. I think the relationship with food thing is something they don't do great. However, one thing I will say is they almost teach you like the A's, B's, and C's of nutrition. I've had people come to work with me who actually have a positive view on Slimming World and Weight Watchers. They're like, I wasn't taught anything about food in school. I had no idea that you could make chips from potatoes, all that kind of, like, I did not know what food was. I just got takeaway food at lunchtime every day between school. So actually learning the A, B's, and C's of like, this is what healthy food looks like, this is what's actually in certain foods, I think that's pretty powerful. So I'm not going to knock them too badly. I'm on the fringes here with C and D. I'm going to put it, Slimming World can go in the middle here in C. Okay. So next on the list is low carb. Now, low carb is, as you imagine it is. It's not quite keto, but it's a lower amount of carbohydrates. Not the worst diet in the world. In fact, it works the same way that keto does in terms of if you remove one fuel source or one macronutrient from your diet, there's a few less calories there. And, you know, for me, low carb works well if you have a low activity lifestyle or you're sedentary. Now, in our program, we classify sedentary as getting to the gym 2, maybe 3 times a week, but generally doing less than 10,000 steps every day. By the way, if you're not tracking that, it's a great metric for just how active you are outside of the gym, because let's be honest, the gym is just 60 minutes of your day. It's the other 23 hours of the day that make up how you're eating, how your hunger is, how your energy is, and how active you are. There's more opportunity to burn calories outside of the gym than there are in the gym. So when I look at low carb, I think, yeah, that works pretty well. The next one on the list is high carb, and we'll get into that in a second. But low carbohydrate for me means we're not completely removing certain foods. We're just moderating the amount of carbohydrates that we're taking in. And I'm not here to demonize carbohydrates. I personally have a decent amount of them in my diet. But one thing that can come from them, or an overconsumption of them, is really high energy spikes. So you're going super high in terms of energy immediately after ingesting them, and then crashing in the afternoon. So you'll find that like a really simple thing to do is have lunch without any carbohydrates, or simple carbohydrates like bread, pasta, things like that. If you can make up the bones of your lunch through protein, meat, veg, fruit, some of those kind of materials, you'll find that your energy lasts way longer into the afternoon. So low carbohydrate, I don't mind this. I'm going to put it in category B. I think it's effective without being too inconvenient for people. Like, you're still allowed carbohydrates, you're just moderating your intake of them. I still think you need some level of dialing in your numbers to look at your actual calorie targets and just focus on that a little bit more closely. It's rare that people can instinctively or intuitively diet their way to weight loss. It often takes a case of looking at the numbers. So don't hang all your hopes on low carb just solving all your problems when it comes to weight loss. Now, high carbohydrate. Who is this useful for? People who are extremely active, right? It's the opposite of low carb. Now, for that purpose, I don't know. I think this is probably lower than a low carbohydrate diet. I think this is, it feels weird to put it in the same category as Slimming World. I might drop Slimming World down to D. Sorry, Slimming World. But I'm going to put high carbohydrate into category C. Now, again, I mentioned, like, if you're a endurance athlete or you're extremely active throughout the day, as in you don't have a desk or an office job, you're constantly moving, yeah, you'll want to have a good source of energy throughout the day. Carbohydrates, high carbohydrate diet is perfect for that. I don't know many people who are even in the moderately active category for weight loss. And that means, like, you know, hitting the gym 4, 5, maybe 6 times a week, and also consistently getting 10 to 12,000 steps every day outside of the gym. I know very, very few people who are doing that. For them, high carbohydrate diets might be more effective because, Using fat as your fuel source is great. It keeps you fuller for longer. It's also important for your hormone production, but generally it's a slower release carbohydrate source. So for example, I've worked with CrossFit Games athletes in the past, and they have to work out a couple of times a day. It's no use to them filling up on high fat foods and having no carbohydrates to expend or use in their workouts. So this one is a good diet. I just don't think that many people it applies to, really. Next one is vegan. I sit on a bit of a different perspective with this. I've never been vegan. I've never tried vegan diets. I've never looked into vegetarian stuff, really. I try and make my diet plant-based, which I think most people should, as in your plate should be made up of components of protein, mostly from plant or animal sources. Then you're looking to fill the rest of the plate with veg and fruit. And if you have a little bit extra, you can add some low glycemic carbs. And if you have anything extra in terms of there, like you've used a really, really lean protein source like turkey or chicken or tofu, then you might want to add some fats in the form of oils, avocados, something like that. Vegan, in my experience, is really, really difficult to get enough protein and vitamin B12 as a byproduct of that. And low protein diets are probably one of the least effective in terms of weight loss. Here's why. Number one, when you're losing weight, you need to keep as much muscle mass on your body as possible. We know that because it boosts your metabolism, it helps your energy. You actually carry a lot of water weight in your muscles, so if you are like looking to see the number on the scales move down, it helps you dehydrate a little bit. Not that that's healthy. But also protein, more than anything else, is really, really effective at keeping you fuller for longer. And that's the main thing when it comes to dieting. You just want to feel fuller, so you don't want to snack or binge out, because if you do, that's generally not because you're hungry. It's because you're sad, emotional, stressed, bored, something else. And that's the thing that we deal with best inside our program. So vegan for me, I think the benefit of obviously getting more micronutrients and vitamins and minerals into your diet is positive. I'm going to put it in category B. I don't think it's an ineffective diet. I think it's difficult to get enough protein. So generally you might find that hunger levels are a little bit higher than usual. Okay, paleo / organic / unprocessed, whatever you want to call this. This is essentially a strict, rigid, regimented diet that says you can't have any junk food. If it's processed, if it has more than 5 ingredients on it, you probably shouldn't eat it. Decent advice. I think a lot of people probably needed to hear this just to question like where their food comes from more often. Is it effective for weight loss? Sure, it's on the effective end of the scale. If we cut out the amount of sugary snacks we're eating, if we cut out the amount of processed foods we're eating, we'd find our energy, our hormone balance, everything would be a lot easier. We wouldn't be kind of finding all these ghost calories in the form of snacks. But what we would be finding is it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. As in, you don't just start eating these foods and magically you're losing weight. You still need to take a look at your numbers in more detail. You need to know where your calorie deficit numbers are at. You need to know how much protein you need to get in a day. All these kind of things play into practice. Is it convenient? I don't think so. Personally, I have tried this. I've tried a 7 to 30 days before of doing like Whole30, which is a more positive way of looking at this. Instead of it being a subtraction diet where you have to cut out all these foods, it's more of a surplus diet. It's like, okay, try and get 200 grams of fruit and veg onto your plate every single day. I've also tried the approach of no processed foods, which means any food that had more than 5 ingredients or came in a packet, I could not eat. I had to cook everything from scratch, and with my lifestyle and my occupation, that's convenient, but not for everyone. So I'm not going to put this super high up. It's probably going to go level with low carb and vegan, and I'm just going to call it the organic diet. I think it's a great idea in practice, and actually if you go to certain countries that are really grounded in their agriculture, Italy is a great example, Ireland to an extent, although it's a lot more processed. Spain is another great example. You actually just get more of an appreciation of where food comes from and what you should look for in quality foods. Okay, next on the list, if it fits your macros. Now this was a craze, this was all the trend from 2008 to 2015, I want to say, somewhere in that ballpark. But it was essentially a diet that if you can fit it into your macronutrient targets for the day, you can eat it. And yeah, I kind of agree with this. I think the problem with it is that people took it too far and ran with it. They were like just eating donuts because it fits your calorie numbers. And, you know, if your maintenance levels, as in the number of calories you need to eat every day, is 2,000 to maintain your current body weight, and you're eating 1,500 calories of donuts plus running marathons every day, yeah, you'll be losing weight. But let's be honest, like, how are you going to feel? You're going to feel like utter shite when your energy is up and down all the time. You're not consuming any protein, so muscle mass is literally stripping off your body because you're trying to lose weight as fast as possible. So for me, is it an effective diet? Yeah, maybe it can be. I don't see people particularly taking it to an effective level, I think. Most of the time when I see this from people, it's they have such a urge and lack of control and lack of understanding of their triggers that they just want to eat junk food and use it in a way to try and lose weight. It's not something I advise to people. We'll talk next about flexible dieting, but the if it fits your macros one for me kind of goes into the Slimming World category or the high carbohydrate category. I don't think it works for that many people. And actually, it screams of, I've got problems with food. So, do you know what? I'm putting it in D. And this is something I used to subscribe to. When I first got into the nutrition and fitness and health space, yeah, I was trying to put everything into my macros, like Mars bars, anything that would go in, I would try and fit it in. And you are crowbarring things into your diet. It is probably not the most effective one in terms of your energy, your mood, retaining muscle mass, even appetite levels. Your digestion's pretty terrible if you're eating crap food all the time and just saying, yeah, well, it's under my calorie target for the day. Okay, number 9, flexible dieting. You guys know where this is going. If you've been following me for a while, I think flexible dieting is the shit. I think it's going straight into the supreme category, the S category. I'll explain why. It is one of the few, if not the only diet on this paper that is not subtractional. What I mean by that is an additional diet, right? It's flexible. Instead of saying you have to cut out all these foods, it's just a way of giving yourself more grace, more flexibility. The way I explain flexible dieting to people is, let's take Slimming World or keto. That is a really specific diet. It's like you can only follow these rules to achieve weight loss success, and that's fine. But that is like trying to run a marathon or a trail run on a really narrow path. A step either side in the wrong direction, you're going to fall off the path and you're going to be like, shit, I can't do this. I can't get through it. It's my fault. I'm terrible. That's not really an effective way to diet. And they also give you no wiggle room to enjoy your life. Flexible dieting is as follows. You essentially have a really good target for protein, carbs, and fats every day. You're like, hey, get most of this stuff from organic foods, healthy products. But if you want to include a Mars bar in there just to squeeze in or just to fill a craving during the day, that's completely fine. If you want to eat pasta, that's okay. It works in a way that the basis of your diet has some solid rules, right? You're still trying to eat enough protein. You are still trying to get 200 grams of fruit and veg on your plate at all times. But it gives you the wiggle room to enjoy a night out every now and then. So for me, this hits the effective strategy really, really well because we're not just throwing shit food down our throat all the time, but it also hits the convenient category really, really well. Most people just want flexibility in their diet. They want a wider path so that falling off track is way more difficult. For me, I don't know, I'm a big fan of this. You can call me biased if you want to in the comments. I don't really care. Flexible dieting is the supreme diet for me. Number 10, Mediterranean. I put this in there because it's one of the most popular. I'm actually going to stick it into the supreme category as well. I know that we've got 2 in there, but like I said earlier in the video, if you have been to a Mediterranean country, I can't believe that's so hard for me to say. If you've been to Spain, Italy, France to a degree, their cuisine isn't my favorite, and Croatia, anywhere around that area that you've kind of consumed their food, you'll know that it's mostly organic, portion sizes are really controlled, and there's some room for enjoyable stuff out there. There's lots of ice cream, there's breads, there's pastas, there's those kind of things as well. And it's effective because it's very little processed. It's all organic ingredients, but there's the flexible element to it as well. So Mediterranean diet, I don't hate it. And again, it actually makes you think about where your food comes from and what you're consuming on a regular basis. I like it. Military diet. I don't know exactly about this one. I've had a client mention it to me before that, again, it's a certain amount of food, really restrictive. I think it's like 1,000 calories a day, which is a joke basically for anyone unless you are already super light and lean and healthy already. I don't know anyone whose deficit numbers are down that low, especially if you're extremely active. And I think by all accounts, this is weird foods like hot dogs, ice creams. When I got this explained to me, it seemed a little bit if it fits your macros, like a lot of junk food and shit. And the whole purpose of this is to strip weight off people as fast as possible, which, if you know anything about my channel and my coaching practice, isn't a good idea, because the faster you go, the more energy required, the less convenient the diet probably is, and the less likely you are to sustain it in the future. So I may have got the definition of military diet wrong. You can correct me if you've done it and it's been really successful for you. But this, just from what I've heard, is the worst possible diet plan in the world. So that's it. Those are my diet plans. That's what I think is most effective and most convenient for people. And remember, the convenient option is the one you're going to probably choose most often. So this is just something slightly different. If you like this type of content and you want to see more, let me know in the comments or subscribe. Send this video out to someone. I don't really mind. But I thought that was a good way for me to break down the pros and cons of all diets, because I think there are. I don't think there's this black and white, like, this sucks, this doesn't. Everything has a pro and con. And look, a lot of this stuff has worked for a lot of different people. But in terms of what I think is most effective and sustainable for most people, these are my beliefs. Hope you have a good day.